He had imagined this moment for years. Through cold nights in foreign land, through the echo of distant gunfire and the long silence that followed it, one image never left his mind. Home. Not the house itself, but what waited inside it. A familiar door, a familiar voice, and above all, the woman he had married before the war took everything else away. The train slowed as it entered the station. The soldier straightened his worn jacket, the fabric still carrying the smell of dust and old memories. Around him, other men gathered their bags, some smiling, some quiet, some staring at the floor as if unsure what they were returning to. He stepped onto the platform with a single thought steady in his chest. This is where my life begins again. The town looked almost the same streets, the same storefronts, the same church steeple rising above the rooftops, but something felt different, quieter, as if the place had moved on while he had been frozen in time. He walked the familiar path toward home, every step filled with anticipation. He imagined her reaction, surprise, tears, relief. He pictured the door opening, her face lighting up when she saw him standing there alive. This was the moment that had kept him going when hope was thin. He had no idea that the life he had preserved so carefully in his mind no longer existed. When he reached the house, he stopped. The curtains were different. The porch had been repainted. A small detail, almost nothing, yet it unsettled him. He told himself it meant she had been keeping busy, making the place warm for his return. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. After a moment, footsteps approached. The door opened slowly, and a stranger stood where his wife should have been. A man, about his age, calm, comfortable, standing in the doorway as if he belonged there. The soldier felt the air leave his lungs. From somewhere behind the man, he heard a familiar voice, softer than he remembered, but unmistakable. His wife stepped into view, and for a brief second, their eyes met. In that moment, years of letters, promises, and waiting collided with reality. She did not scream. She did not run. She did not say his name. Instead, her expression held something far more painful. Resignation. "I thought you weren't coming back," she said quietly. Those words would echo in his mind for years to come. The war had taken his youth, but standing there, on his own doorstep, he realized it had taken something else as well. The life he believed had been waiting for him, and the choice his wife had made would force him to confront a truth far harder than any battlefield. Sometimes the world moves on, even when you don't. This is the story of what happens when a man survives the war, but comes home to a loss he never prepared for. The soldier stood on the porch for a moment longer than necessary, his hand still resting on the doorframe. He had crossed oceans, survived nights where sleep never came, and faced dangers he never spoke about. Yet nothing had prepared him for this, standing outside his own home, feeling like a guest. The man at the door shifted his weight slightly, uncertain. "I didn't know you were coming today," he said, not unkindly. The soldier nodded, though his mind was still trying to catch up with what his eyes had already accepted. He looked past the man into the house. The furniture had been rearranged. A different lamp stood near the window. Small changes, but unmistakable ones. This was no longer a place frozen in waiting. It was a place that had continued living. His wife stepped forward. She looked older, not much, just enough to remind him that time had passed for her too. Her hair was pinned differently. There was a steadiness in her posture he did not remember. She was not the woman who waved goodbye at the station years ago. "I didn't know where you were," she said again, her voice careful. "The letters stopped coming." "They stopped letting us write," he replied. His voice sounded distant, even to himself. "That doesn't mean I stopped coming home." Silence filled the space between them. It was not angry silence. It was worse, uncertain, fragile, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. The man stepped aside. "You should come in," he said quietly. The soldier hesitated, then crossed the threshold. The floor creaked beneath his boots the same way it always had. That small, familiar sound almost broke him. They sat at the table, 3 people, bound by a past none of them had chosen. The man introduced himself as Thomas. He had moved to town 2 years earlier, helped her fix the fence after a storm, stayed for dinner, then stayed longer. "I didn't plan for this," she said, looking down at her hands. "I waited. God knows I waited. But years pass differently when you don't know if someone is alive." The soldier listened. He did not interrupt. He had learned long ago that some battles were won by silence. She spoke of loneliness, of nights when the house felt too big, of neighbors who stopped asking after the first year, of holidays that came and went without word. She spoke of fear, not dramatic fear, but the quiet kind that settles in when hope stretches too thin. "I buried you in my mind," she said softly, "not because I wanted to, but because I had to survive." He nodded. He understood survival. He had lived it every day. Thomas spoke next. He did not try to defend himself. He did not apologize either. He simply explained. "I didn't know you," he said. "I only knew the woman in front of me, and she needed someone who was there." The soldier felt something shift inside him, not anger, not hatred, just clarity. After a while he stood. His legs felt unsteady, but his decision did not. "I won't stay here," he said. "Not tonight." She looked up, startled. "Where will you go?" "I'll find a place," he replied. "I didn't come back to take something that doesn't belong to me anymore." The words surprised even him. But once spoken, they felt right. He stepped back onto the porch, the evening light stretching long shadows across the yard. As he walked away, he did not look back. Some goodbyes did not need witnesses. That night, he slept in a small room above a local diner. The bed was narrow. The ceiling fan rattled. But for the first time since returning, he slept without dreaming of gunfire. In the days that followed, the town slowly took notice. Some people shook his hand, offering quiet words of respect. Others avoided him, unsure of what to say. News traveled fast in small places, especially news that made people uncomfortable. He found work repairing fences and fixing roofs. Honest labor, familiar. It gave his hands something to do while his mind caught up with his new reality. He passed his old house often. Sometimes he saw her through the window. Sometimes he saw Thomas. He never stopped walking. One afternoon he received a letter. Not from her, but from the War Department. A formal notice. Delayed benefits. Recognition for service. Words that arrived too late to mean much. That evening he sat alone, staring at the paper. The war had ended for the world long ago, but for him, it had only changed shape. He realized then that coming home was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a far harder chapter, learning how to live when the future you imagined no longer exists. And as the days passed, one truth became unavoidable. The war had taken more than time. It had taken the man he used to be. But what it had not taken, what it could never take, was his ability to choose who he would become next. The town had not changed much, but the way people looked at him had. At first it was subtle. A pause in conversation when he entered a room. A nod that lasted a second too long. Faces that carried sympathy, curiosity, and something else. Relief that his story was not their own. He understood it. Small towns remembered everything, and they remembered it slowly. Each morning, he woke before sunrise in the room above the diner. The smell of coffee drifted up through the floorboards, warm and familiar. He washed his face in the small sink, studying the man in the mirror. His hair was thinner now. Lines marked his face where youth once lived. The war had carved time into him, and the homecoming had carved even deeper. He worked wherever he could. A broken gate, a leaning barn door, a roof that had lost its fight with winter. People paid him fairly, often more than the work required. No one said why. They did not need to. One afternoon, as he repaired a fence near the edge of town, an older man approached. He leaned heavily on a cane, his steps slow but steady. "You came back," the man said simply. "Yes, sir." "Most don't," the soldier nodded. "Some never leave." The man smiled faintly. "That's the truth of it." They worked in silence for a while, the sound of wood and hammer filling the space between them. Then the man spoke again. "My brother went to war once," he said. "Came home different. His wife couldn't recognize him anymore." The soldier did not look up. Did he recognize himself? The man hesitated. Not right away. That night the words stayed with him. He began to understand that what he had lost was not just his marriage, but the version of himself that belonged to it. The man who had kissed his wife goodbye had believed in certainty, in promises that time could not undo. That belief had not survived the war. On Sundays the church bells still rang. He sat in the back pew, unnoticed but not unseen. He prayed quietly, not for answers, but for endurance. Faith, like everything else, had been altered by what he had lived through, but it had not disappeared. He saw her there sometimes. She never sat near him. Their eyes rarely met. When they did, there was no anger, only a shared understanding that some distances were no longer meant to be crossed. Weeks passed, then months. He learned the rhythm of his new life. Wake early, work hard, eat simply, sleep without expectation. It was not happiness, but it was stable. And stability, he discovered, was its own form of mercy. One evening, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Heavy rain battered the town, and the wind carried the sound of branches breaking in the distance. Near dusk, a knock came at his door. It was Thomas. The sight of him stirred something uncomfortable, but the soldier did not show it. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "The roof," Thomas said. "It's leaking badly. She's worried it won't hold through the night." The soldier paused. Then he reached for his coat. The three of them stood together again, this time beneath dark clouds and pounding rain. He climbed onto the roof without a word, securing loose boards, reinforcing weak beams. His hands moved with practiced certainty. From below, she watched, not as a wife, not as something lost, but as someone witnessing a man doing what he had always done, providing, fixing, enduring. When he finished, Thomas thanked him. "I won't forget this," he said. The soldier nodded. "That's not why I did it." He walked back through the rain, soaked and exhausted, but lighter than he had felt in months. That night, he realized something important. Letting go did not mean becoming bitter, and dignity did not require revenge. The war had taught him how to survive destruction. This new life was teaching him something harder: how to live with what could not be restored. As summer faded into fall, the town softened toward him. Invitations came. A seat offered at the counter. Conversations that did not stop when he arrived. He was no longer the man who returned to heartbreak. He was simply a man who had stayed. And in staying, he began to reclaim something quiet but powerful: his sense of place in the world. What he did not yet know was that life had not finished testing him, not even close. Because soon, an unexpected request would arrive, one that would force him to face the past again, and decide whether he was ready to move forward or remain forever shaped by what he had lost. The letter arrived on a quiet afternoon, folded once and slipped beneath the door of his room above the diner. The paper was plain, the handwriting careful, almost hesitant. He recognized it immediately. He did not open it right away. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed holding the envelope as if it carried weight beyond words. In some ways it did. He had learned that letters could change lives, sometimes more than actions ever could. When he finally unfolded it, her words were simple. She wrote that Thomas had fallen ill, not suddenly but steadily, a lingering condition that had worsened over the past months. He was still strong enough to stand, still able to work in short bursts, But the doctor's visits were becoming more frequent. The uncertainty frightened her. She wrote that she did not know who else to ask. The soldier read the letter twice, then a third time. He felt no anger, no bitterness, only a familiar tightening in his chest. The feeling of being called upon when the cost was known, but the outcome was not. That evening, he walked toward the house he no longer called his own. The sky was clear, the air cool. Each step brought with it memories he had not invited but could not refuse. She met him at the door. Her face showed relief and shame. "I wouldn't have asked," she said, "if there were another way." He nodded. "Tell me what you need." Thomas sat in a chair by the window, thinner now, his breath shallow but steady. He looked up when the soldier entered, his eyes holding gratitude mixed with something close to humility. "I don't expect this," Thomas said, "but I trust you." The soldier almost smiled at that. Trust. It was a word he understood well. They spoke plainly. The roof would need reinforcement before winter. The fence in the back had rotted through. And the barn, once neglected, now necessary, required more work than Thomas could manage. "I'll do it," the soldier said. She looked at him surprised. "You don't have to." "I know," he replied, "but I will." Over the following weeks, he returned often. He repaired what was broken, strengthened what was weak. He worked slowly, carefully, never rushing. His presence became part of the routine, not as a reminder of loss, but as a quiet constant. Sometimes she brought him water. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they worked in silence. One afternoon she asked him a question she had avoided for years. "Do you ever hate me?" she asked. He considered it carefully. "No," he said. "I grieved you." "That's different." Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. As Thomas's condition worsened, the soldier stayed longer. He helped with meals, lifted heavy things, sat nearby when Thomas grew tired. There was no rivalry left between them, only shared responsibility. One evening, as the light faded, Thomas spoke softly. "If I don't make it through the winter," he said, "I need to know she won't be alone." The soldier met his gaze. "She won't be." The word surprised them both. That night, walking back to the diner, the soldier realized what had changed. He was no longer defined by what he had lost. He was being defined by what he was choosing to give. The war had once demanded sacrifice without meaning. This was different. This was deliberate. This was human. As autumn deepened, Thomas's health declined further. The town noticed. So did the doctor. And so did the soldier, who began sleeping fewer hours, pushing himself harder than he should have. One morning, he collapsed while carrying lumber. When he awoke, she was there. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw something he had not expected. Not guilt, not regret, but respect. For the first time since returning, he felt something loosen inside him. But fate, it seemed, was not finished testing him. Because soon, he would be asked to do something far more difficult than repair a house. He would be asked to forgive, not in words, but in action. And the cost of that choice would change the course of all their lives. Winter arrived earlier than expected. The first snow fell heavy and wet, clinging to rooftops and tree branches as if the town itself were bracing for something difficult. The soldier noticed it the moment he stepped outside before dawn. His breath fogged the air. His joints ached more than usual. And somewhere deep inside he felt the familiar sense of approaching reckoning. Thomas's condition worsened quickly. The doctor came more often now, his visits quiet and brief. There were words he avoided using, endings he did not speak aloud. The soldier understood what silence meant. He had heard it many times before. One afternoon, Thomas asked to speak with him alone. They sat by the window where pale winter light filtered through. Thomas's hands trembled slightly as he folded them together. "I owe you something," Thomas said. The soldier waited, I knew about you, Thomas continued. Not at first, but eventually I learned who she had married. The soldier felt a tightening in his chest, but he did not interrupt. She believed you were gone, Thomas said. But I knew there was a chance you weren't. Why didn't you tell her? The soldier asked. Thomas closed his eyes. Because by the time I found out, she had already begun to live again, and I was afraid of taking that away from her. Silence followed. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Thomas said. I don't think I deserve it. I just needed you to know the truth. The soldier absorbed the words slowly. He thought of all the nights he had spent imagining betrayal, imagining anger. The truth was quieter and far more complicated. I understand fear, the soldier said finally. I've lived with it. That evening, the wind howled through the trees, rattling windows and doors. Snow piled higher against the house. Thomas's breathing grew shallow. She sat by the bed, her hands clasped tightly, her face pale with exhaustion. When the doctor left, she turned to the soldier. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. He sat beside her. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to stay. The night stretched long. Near dawn, Thomas stirred. He opened his eyes briefly, his gaze finding the soldier. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything. The soldier nodded. By morning, Thomas was gone. The town gathered quietly. There was no spectacle, no drama, just cold air, dark coats, bowed heads. The soldier stood a few steps back. Not family, not stranger, something in between. After the service, she approached him. Her face was lined with grief, but her voice was steady. I don't expect anything from you, she said. Not now, not ever. He looked at her. Neither do I. In the days that followed, he helped her settle affairs. He fixed what still needed fixing. He stayed when silence became too heavy. One evening, she spoke words she had held back for years. I didn't stop loving you, she said. I just didn't know how to wait anymore. He listened, then answered with honesty. I didn't stop loving you either, he said. But love changes when life changes. They did not touch. They did not promise. They did not reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. What passed between them was something older and quieter, understanding. As winter deepened, the soldier returned to his small room above the diner each night. But something had shifted. The bitterness he once feared had never arrived. Instead, he felt lighter, as if forgiveness, real forgiveness, had cost him pain, but freed him from carrying it. He realized then that forgiveness was not about absolving others. It was about releasing oneself. The war had taught him how to endure suffering. This had taught him how to transcend it. But the story was not finished. Because with Thomas gone, the question that remained was no longer about the past. It was about the future. And whether two people shaped by loss and time could ever find a way forward, not by returning to what once was, but by choosing what could still be. After Thomas was buried, the house grew quieter than it had ever been. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that pressed against the walls and lingered in corners. The soldier noticed it the first evening he returned to help her sort through Thomas's things. The ticking of the clock seemed louder. Even the floorboards creaked more sharply, as if they too were adjusting to absence. She moved slowly, carefully. Every object carried weight now. A coat still hanging by the door, a pair of boots by the wall, a book left unfinished on the table. Grief did not arrive all at once. It revealed itself in moments, unexpected and relentless. The soldier did not rush her. He had learned that grief moved at its own pace. War had taught him that loss could not be argued with. Some days, she spoke. Other days, she barely looked up. He stayed either way. He repaired what needed repair. He cooked when she forgot to eat. He shoveled snow without being asked. People in town noticed, not in the way they once had, with curiosity or pity, but with quiet acceptance. They saw two people sharing work, sharing silence, sharing time. Nothing improper, nothing rushed, just steadiness. One evening, she finally asked the question both of them had avoided. "Why are you still here?" she said, her voice low. He thought carefully before answering. "Because you shouldn't have to do this alone," he said, "and because leaving doesn't make the past hurt less." She nodded. "I was afraid you stayed because you hoped things could go back to how they were." He shook his head. "No," he said. "Some things don't go back. They go forward. Differently." The honesty settled between them like a fragile truce. As winter gave way to early spring, something subtle changed. The days grew longer. Light returned to the rooms. The house felt less like a place of endings and more like one waiting to be redefined. They began to talk more, not about what had been lost, but about ordinary things. The price of supplies, repairs needed before summer, stories from town. Shared memories surfaced occasionally, but they no longer cut as deeply. One afternoon, she brought out an old box from the attic. "I kept your letters," she said quietly, "even the ones that came before everything stopped." He opened the box slowly. Paper yellowed with time, ink faded but still legible, words written by a younger man, certain of his future. "I couldn't throw them away," she said, "even when I thought you were gone." He nodded, his throat tight. "I'm glad you didn't." They sat together, reading in silence. That night, after he left, she stood at the window and watched him walk away. For the first time since the war ended, she felt something unexpected, not longing, not regret, but possibility. Weeks passed. The soldier began taking on more permanent work around town. He rented a small house on the edge of the property, close enough to help when needed, far enough to keep boundaries clear. He did not move back into the old house. That decision mattered. One evening, as they sat on the porch, she spoke softly. "I don't know what I want," she said, "but I know what I don't want, to live the rest of my life defined by what I lost." He looked at her. "Neither do I." The moment passed without touch, without promises. And yet, it changed everything. The soldier realized something then. Love at this stage of life did not announce itself loudly. It did not demand certainty or grand declarations. It arrived quietly, with respect, with patience, with choice. Still, he hesitated, because love after loss carried risk, not of heartbreak, but of reopening wounds that had barely healed. He prayed that night, not for guidance, but for wisdom. And wisdom, he found, did not come as an answer. It came as a question. Was he willing to build something new, knowing it would never be what he once imagined? The answer did not come immediately. But life, as it often does, would soon force his hand, because a decision was coming, one that would either anchor him to this place for good, or send him down a different path entirely. The offer arrived in the early spring, carried by a man from the neighboring county who recognized the soldier from years before the war. "There's steady work," the man said. "Good pay, a chance to start clean." The words lingered. A fresh beginning. A place where no one knew his story, no shared history, no quiet glances filled with memory. For the first time in years, leaving was a real option. That night, the soldier walked alone through the town, past the church, past the diner, past the house that had once been his and was no longer. Every step carried weight. He realized that staying required courage too, perhaps more than leaving ever would. He stopped by the river at the edge of town, where water moved steadily forward, never turning back. War had taught him about endings. This place had taught him about endurance. Now, life was asking him to choose. The next morning, she noticed something different in him. "You're thinking about leaving," she said. "Yes." She did not ask why. She did not plead. She only nodded. "I won't ask you to stay," she said. "I've asked enough of you already." Her restraint moved him more than words ever could. "I need to know something," he said. "Not for the past. For now." She met his gaze. then ask. "If I stay," he said slowly, "it won't be because of what we once were. It will be because of what we could still become." She took a long breath. "That's the only way I would accept it." They stood in silence, the air between them filled not with tension, but honesty. That afternoon, he declined the offer, not out of obligation, not out of nostalgia, but out of choice. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. He continued working. She continued rebuilding. Slowly, naturally, their lives intertwined, not as they once had, but as two people who understood the cost of commitment. One evening, months later, they sat together watching the sun set behind the trees. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to believe love was something you waited for." He smiled faintly. "I used to believe it was something you fought for." They shared a quiet laugh. "Now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "I think it's something you choose. Every day." They never remarried. They never needed to. He kept his small house nearby. She kept hers. They shared meals, shared burdens, shared time. And in time, the town stopped wondering and started understanding. Years later, people would speak of the soldier who came home from war and lost everything, and how he rebuilt a life not from bitterness, but from grace. They would speak of a woman who learned that survival was not betrayal, and that love, when it returns, does so quietly. And when the soldier grew old, sitting on the porch as seasons changed around him, he knew something with certainty. The war had taken his youth. Coming home had taken his certainty. But life had given him something rarer, a love chosen freely, a life lived honestly, and peace earned, not assumed. Sometimes the greatest victories are not won on battlefields. They are won in the quiet decision to stay,